metaphorical rug can be pulled from under your feet quite quick at any point. You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. But when it does happen to you, yeah, then it takes you into some pretty not great places.
Prince William just did the unthinkable, and it changes everything for Meghan and the Sussex legacy.
The solutions are out there. There is real solutions to these problems.
After months of behind-the-scenes tension, the palace has finally drawn a line that cannot be crossed. But what really pushed William to take this step? And how will Harry react now that the announcement is out? Join us as we break down every shocking detail, reveal what led to the decision, and show how the palace is handling the fallout. Prince William's shocking announcement. The day began like a typical royal morning in Kensington Palace. According to unnamed palace sources, it was precisely 7:48 in the morning. The palace released a statement through its official channels. Within seconds, aides inside the palace knew this was not routine. The statement did not come from an office, a spokesperson, or a committee. It came directly from Prince William himself. That detail alone changed everything. Unlike typical palace announcements, there was no formality. In a move that caught palace observers off guard, Prince William announced the complete and permanent end to any future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex. There was no room left for reinterpretation, no space for reconciliation stories, and no language that suggested a chance for review. It closed a door that many believed would never fully shut, but it wasn't just about the message. It was the timing that really mattered. Keep watching, because we are about to reveal everything you need to know about William's shocking decision. The timing of the release matters a lot. It was 7:48 in the morning, which meant it hit breakfast television in Britain, afternoon newsrooms in Asia, and late-night desks in North America all at once. That timing ensured there was no quiet window, no soft rollout. Within 3 minutes, the BBC reported the news. Sky News followed. ITV cut into morning shows. In the United States, CNN pushed an alert banner across its screen. By 8 o'clock, the story had replaced financial updates, weather segments, and entertainment news across major networks. Veteran reporters like Nicholas Witchell, who has covered the monarchy for decades, described the moment as something he had never seen in his career. International media moved fast. Reuters distributed a breaking bulletin within 4 minutes. In France, Le Monde updated its homepage headline before most commuters reached work. But the press reaction is nothing compared to social media. Data from CrowdTangle showed over 1 million interactions across platforms within the first 10 minutes. On X, the topic reached #1 worldwide in under 8 minutes. Outside Kensington Palace, journalists were already in position. Some had been there since dawn, tipped off that something significant was coming, though none expected this scale. A palace staffer even described it as a rupture of historic proportions, not just within a family, but within British society as a whole. William also ordered the palace to activate a response. Plans like this take a long time to make. Interestingly, a former palace staff even confirmed that such scenarios are usually years in the making. However, what made this moment stand out was not even the noise, but certainty. Now, this is a shocker. People all over the globe already sensed that the Crown and the Sussexes weren't on good terms through interviews, documentaries, court filings, and media commentary. Those episodes were messy, emotional, and often reactive. This announcement was neither emotional nor reactive. It was administrative in tone but personal in origin. That combination unsettled everybody. Although analysts believe that the financial markets did not move dramatically after the announcement, there were some disruptions. The pound remained stable, though shares tied to British media companies saw brief spikes in trading volume as people raced to view the announcement. Public reaction across the world was not the same, though. In the United Kingdom, YouGov Snap polling later that day showed a sharp divide by age. Older citizens largely viewed the decision as overdue and necessary for the stability of the institution. But the younger folks were not particularly happy with the finality of William's decision. Aside from that, William's decision not to give a direct speech also mattered. There were no emotional appeals, no personal grievances aired, no reference to past interviews or allegations. By avoiding that, there was no immediate counter to William's announcement. Media outlets had facts to report, but little to dissect. That vacuum meant commentators could only analyze structure, precedent, and consequence, not personalities. But according to royal historians, William's decision is nothing new or surprising. For instance, the palace removed Her Royal Highness from Diana's name, following her famous divorce from Charles back in 1996. But others were quick to counter that even then, communication was handled through government channels rather than personal declaration. No one could recall a moment when a future king personally authored such a declaration. As the news spread, embassies reached out to the palace for clarifications. According to a source, Commonwealth Governors General received briefings from William's office, and by midday, palace switchboards had logged thousands of calls. And guess what? Yeah, most went unanswered, not due to overload, but by design. Silence became part of the message. The institution had spoken, and the decision is not up for debate. By early afternoon, the story had shifted from what happened to what comes next. Commentators began asking how this would affect future coronation planning, charitable patronages, and media strategy. Legal analysts discussed the implications for titles, funding, and representation, careful not to speculate beyond what the statement allowed. The line had been drawn, but its shadow stretched forward. As the day moved on, people's attention slowly began to drift toward the reason behind William's action. People wanted to understand how such a decision was prepared, who was consulted, and how long it had been coming. Stick around, because you are about to find out what triggered William. True motive behind William's decision. What many do not understand was why William took this decision. To understand this, let's go back to autumn 2024. According to palace sources, everyday life inside Kensington Palace back then felt like a storm. What had once seemed like isolated fights now felt like a raging battle. Patterns were forming, and people inside the palace could no longer ignore them. First, it was about Catherine. Her major initiatives kept running into the same problem. Each time she stepped forward with a serious project, negative media stories would surge almost immediately. It happened too often to brush aside. What really raised suspicions was not just the criticism, but the timing. For instance, in September, Catherine led a nationwide early childhood initiative built around long-term mental health outcomes. The campaign was backed by researchers from University College London and charities working in underfunded communities. The response should have been about the work itself. Instead, within 2 days, global media outlets were pushing stories about Sussex. It was like an intentional plan to divert attention away from Catherine's project. But that wasn't all. The script played out again in October. According to eyewitnesses, Catherine visited a network of domestic abuse shelters, a cause she had supported quietly for years. Once again, the headlines were spinned. The media started spreading stories about Harry and Meghan, pushing Kate's work to the margins. Inside the palace, this no longer felt accidental. Palace staff began to track the pattern. Communications teams lined up Catherine's public schedule next to media activity charts. Dates, headlines, and social media spikes were logged. The numbers told a clear story. 7 of the 9 major engagements Catherine carried out between September and November were followed by intense negative coverage within 72 hours. The trail was hard to ignore. Catherine kept her reaction private. Instead of frustration, she asked for evidence. Her office compiled timelines, media data, and engagement metrics. When she showed the material to William, it was clear and factual. There were no accusations, just a clear pattern laid out in front of him. William did not need convincing for long. He had grown up under press pressure, but this felt different. These stories were not just noise, they were disrupting his wife's work. Over time, he came to a firm conclusion. Whatever the source, the impact on Catherine's role had become unacceptable. While all of these were happening, remember that Harry and Meghan had earlier decided to leave the royal fold and relocate to America. And to the royal family, this was still an unfinished matter. What was meant to be a clean break turned into a long-running tug-of-war played out through interviews, court cases, documentaries, and commentary. The relationship between William and Harry had steadily worsened. Ties between Harry and the king were strained as well. Each time either of them spoke in public, they reopened wounds that never had time to heal. Those unresolved issues fed directly into the media cycle. Stories about Sussex also continued to disturb the palace long after the couple had stepped away from royal duties. By late autumn, internal reports showed real strain. Communications staff were spending nearly a third more time on Sussex-related matters than the year before. Legal consultations had doubled since spring. Security briefings grew longer as online hostility increased. This was no longer about image management. It was about capacity. But for King Charles, the pressure came in a different way. According to people close to him, the conflict weighed heavily on him. As a father, he remained aware of his bond with Harry. As monarch, he could not ignore the cost to the institution. Meetings increasingly circled the same uncomfortable question: how long could family loyalty coexist with public responsibility? Analysts also presented data showing a rise in online hostility aimed directly at Catherine to the king. The tone had changed. What used to be gossip now edged closer to threat. Here's where it gets more interesting. According to digital analysts in the British security services, most of the online activities against Catherine came from pro-Sussex online users and groups. These were not official groups, but communities that mobilized quickly. Many were reposting statements from past interviews and documentaries. Others said their attacks were defense or advocacy in the interest of Harry and Meghan. The result was the same. Catherine became a target whenever Sussex stories related to Sussex surfaced. William saw the situation clearly. Catherine was not a side figure. She was central to the future of the monarchy. Anything that weakened her public role weakened the institution itself. For him, this crossed from personal frustration into strategic risk. Behind closed doors, royal advisors told William that the pro-Sussex groups have crossed all lines. And from that moment onwards, William's attention shifted away from managing the fallout toward stopping it altogether. Diplomatic partners were beginning to notice as well. British envoys reported constant questions from allies. Officials in Canada and Australia asked whether the internal issues could affect upcoming engagements. European counterparts raised concerns about consistency. No one used the word crisis, but uncertainty was creeping into conversations. By November, William had made the decision. This was no longer about whether action was needed. It was about how far that action should go. The Sussex identity, especially as a public brand tied to Meghan, kept colliding with the crown, despite years of attempted separation. Royal advisors remind William that Harry would always be family, and Meghan would always be linked to him in public perception. But their persistent mention in media conversations was pulling the royal family into a ditch. And that was exactly when William ordered the preparations. Palace lawyers were told to review the implications. The idea of formally withdrawing the Sussex title moved from background talk to active planning, not as punishment, but as a way to close a chapter that refused to end. By the time winter approached, the palace was no longer reacting. It was getting ready. The pressure that would soon explode into public view had been building for months, made worse by unresolved family fractures, mounting operational strain, and a growing sense that clarity had become the only way forward. And if you think William made the decision alone, then what you are about to see will leave you speechless. Stay with us. Princess Anne's advice to Prince William. By this stage, the pressure inside the palace was no longer coming from headlines alone. It was coming from people who had lived through royal crises before and knew when a situation was being left open for too long. One of those people was Princess Anne. Anne has always been known as the diligent royal. She does not enjoy drama, and she does not believe problems solve themselves just because people avoid them. During private discussions, she began to push a clear idea. The real issue was not Harry and Meghan's behavior on any single day. The real issue was that their status had never been properly closed. According to Anne, leaving things half settled was what kept the story alive. When roles are vague, people keep testing the edges. When boundaries are soft, they get pushed again and again. She believed that the Sussex situation had stayed in that gray zone for years, and that gray zone was the cause of the hostility against Catherine. But that wasn't all. Anne added that as long as nothing was written down clearly, negotiation never stopped. Every interview, every appearance, every legal move will reopen the same questions. Where do they stand? What do they represent? How far does the connection go? And as long as those questions stay open, the palace will remain vulnerable. Royal observers agree that Princess Anne's advice was practical. Stop relying on private understanding. Stop hoping the noise will fade. Put clear limits in writing, formal boundaries that cannot be bent later, not to punish anyone, but to end the cycle. Palace lawyers also agree with her. Interestingly, the legal team had also been warning the palace for months. The lawyers even warned William that the unclear status of some royals was creating legal confusion. If someone uses a title but does not carry responsibility, that opens the door to disputes. If public figures criticize the institution while still being loosely connected to it, there would be no accountability. And when there is no accountability, legal problems follow. As if that wasn't enough, security teams also raised their own concerns. We mentioned earlier that every time Sussex-related stories flared, online hostility rose with them. Catherine's name appeared more often in hostile posts. So, naturally, they had to carry out threat assessments regularly. Protection planning for Catherine also took more time. Perhaps one of the hostile commentators online was planning to take things a little bit further. And never forget the reputational risk to the palace. The truth is that the palace could not fully control messaging while unresolved family issues kept spilling into public view. Each news cycle pulled attention away from official work and back into conflicts. That aside, there was also the issue no one liked to discuss openly: constitutional risk. Lawyers warned that titles, representation, and perceived authority are not just symbolic. They have legal meaning, and when left undefined, invites avoidable conflicts. The message to William was clear: end the ambiguity now, or deal with bigger problems later. Around the same time, the Foreign Office started treating the Sussex issue differently. According to leaked reports, British diplomats abroad noticed confusion among foreign officials. Some were unsure whether Harry and Meghan still spoke in any way for the crown. Soft power depends on clarity. When symbols of a country appear divided, confidence drops. Britain's influence relies heavily on stability and continuity of the royal stool. When that stability looks shaky, even slightly, it weakens the image. William paid attention to all of this. But what weighed on him most was closer to home. Catherine was still a frequent target online. The tone of the attacks had changed over time. They were sharper, more personal, more organized. William's children were growing up in a digital world where nothing disappears. What follows parents online eventually reaches children too. That reality weighed heavy on him. He would never allow little Charlotte and her brothers to face online hostility. Stay with us because we are about to reveal something interesting. You see, for a long time, William had tried to keep space for reconciliation. He believed that time and distance might cool things down. But instead of cooling, the situation kept reigniting. Every pause was followed by another flare-up. He started to see that keeping the door open came with a cost. It allowed the conflict to continue. It allowed pressure to build again and again. It placed his family in the line of fire without offering any real path forward. Slowly, his priorities shifted. Protecting his wife came first. Protecting his children followed closely behind. The hope of reconciliation began to move lower on the list. Inside the palace, people stopped talking around the issue. They started talking through it. The idea that this could settle on its own no longer felt believable. Princess Anne's point kept returning. When nothing is settled, instability becomes permanent. Every delay feeds the problem instead of easing it. By mid-November, patience was thin. Even those who had urged caution earlier began to accept that waiting was doing more harm than acting. William faced a hard truth. Prolonged ambiguity was not neutral. It was damaging. Every unclear boundary created another opening. Every attempt to soften the situation extended it. By late November, the direction became unavoidable. This was not framed as revenge or punishment. It was framed as drawing a line that could not be crossed again, as choosing stability over constant disruption, as protecting the future instead of endlessly revisiting the past. William did not see it as choosing institution over family. He saw it as choosing safety over uncertainty, choosing clarity over constant negotiation. To people outside the palace, what came next would look sudden. It would seem like a sharp turn. But inside, it felt like the end of a very long road. Everything had been weighed. Every warning had been heard. Every alternative had been tested and found lacking. The boundaries were ready. The path forward was clear. And as November came to a close, the palace stood on the edge of a decision that would finally stop the drift, even if it meant closing a chapter that many once hoped could end differently. We've come to the very moment the royal family finalized the agreement to withdraw the prestigious title from Meghan. This promises to be interesting. Stay tuned. The final royal family meeting. This is the moment everything finally came together. No cameras, no announcements, just a small group gathering at Windsor on December 1st. The meeting was restricted. Phones were left outside. Only the people who truly needed to be there were present. Palace staff confirmed that William arrived with something he had been working on for weeks, a finished draft. Not notes, not talking points, a full statement in a printed file. William's name and signature were boldly inscribed on the cover page. Those in the room understood immediately what that meant. When a future king puts his own name and voice on a document like this, it signals finality. It means the decision has already been made in his mind. The meeting was not about whether to act. It was about how to align with the new reality. Nobody faced the hardest part of the moment than King Charles. Harry was his son. Meghan was his daughter-in-law. And no amount of duty erased that fact. He was heavily overwhelmed with emotion, and everyone could see it. Years of strain had already taken their toll. This was another cut, even if it was necessary. At the same time, Charles had spent his life preparing for moments where feeling could not override. Responsibility. He had watched past monarchs hesitate and pay the price. He understood that leaving things unresolved had already done damage. Acknowledging the need for action did not make it painless, but it made it unavoidable. When the meeting started, Anne spoke with the same steadiness she had shown all along. Her focus never drifted to feelings or emotions. She stayed on one point. The monarchy depends on stability. When lines are unclear, the whole structure wobbles. She reminded the king all she had said to William before, that delay was not kind, that ambiguity was not compassion, that protecting the institution meant drawing lines people could see and understand. Once those lines existed, the noise would eventually fade. Catherine was also at the meeting. Her concern was the tone of William's decision. The statement needed to be firm without sounding cruel, final without sounding angry. After all, Meghan is her sister-in-law, and Harry was her brother-in-law. Nothing personal. She understood better than most how words travel, how they get clipped, shared, and replayed. And luckily, William's draft aligned to her visions. No personal attacks, no history lessons. It focused on the present and the future. It said what was ending and left no confusion about permanence. The discussion did not drag on. There were no rewrites and no edits, no requests for delay. Agreement came faster than many expected. That speed was its own signal. Everyone in the room knew they had reached the end of the road. The decision was simple: release the statement as written. They also agreed that the statement be published the following morning, early enough to reach multiple time zones at once. That's how all major palace announcements had been handled. Once the meeting ended, the palace staff set to work. Communications teams were alerted on a need-to-know basis. Technical staff prepared release systems. Security reviewed schedules. Everything followed plans that had been prepared weeks earlier. Stay glued, because this may be the most interesting part of the story. News of the plan got to Harry. According to sources familiar with royal protocol, Harry received a copy of the statement privately before it went public. The message reached him directly, without media filters. Eyewitnesses admit that he remained silent. No immediate reply, no protest, no questions. That silence spoke volumes. Whatever expectations remained were gone. Whatever hope lingered had nowhere to go. By dawn, the statement was published exactly as agreed. No changes, no delays. The timing landed precisely as planned. Meanwhile, inside the palace, operations shifted immediately. Schedules were adjusted. Call handling protocols changed. Certain channels were closed. Others were reinforced. Staff followed instructions calmly, without drama. Security teams moved to higher readiness, not in response to physical threat, but digital noise. Online reactions surged fast. Analysts tracked volume, not sentiment. The goal was awareness, not engagement. Within hours, the story dominated global coverage. But inside the palace, there was no scramble, no confusion. The preparation showed. Every department knew its role. What struck many staff later was how still everything felt. After years of tensions, there was finally a sense of closure. The decision had been made. The line had been drawn. For William, the moment brought a mix of both relief and pain. Relief that the endless cycle had stopped. Pain because he knew that nothing this final comes without cost. He had chosen protection over possibility, stability over hope, safety over endless negotiation. That choice would be debated, criticized, and analyzed. He knew that too. For Charles, the morning was no easier. The institution moved forward, but the personal loss remained. Duty had won, but not without leaving marks. Anne saw what she expected to see, a clear boundary at last. Not perfect, not painless, but necessary. Catherine focused forward, on shielding her children, on returning attention to work that mattered, on rebuilding quiet where noise had lived too long. By midday, the whole world had settled into their new reality. The machinery adjusted. The world reacted. The family absorbed the shock in private. The story the public saw began that morning. The story behind it ended the night before. Thank you for staying with us. Do you think William could have handled the matter any different? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.